The Tiger, the Panther, names that became legends of the Reich. But legends write headlines. They do not win wars. The real war was forged by gray, anonymous steel. This machine had no predator's name, no myth. It was pure, brutal pragmatism on tracks. How did a weapon without an identity rival the Reich's most famous predators in number? The answer was economics. The man-hours and resources to build one heavy Tiger could assemble several of these assault guns, making them the true spine of a depleted war machine. In just 1.5 years, it was everywhere. The forests of Latvia, the beaches of Normandy, a statistical ghost known as the StuG IV, but it never received an official name. This steel phantom was not born in the design bureau. It was an act of brutal improvisation by Krupp's engineers. The concept first appeared in February 1943, a sketch, a dismissed idea. But with the Reich's primary factory in ruins, desperation pulled the old drawings from the shelf. The solution was a forced marriage of steel. Take the proven superstructure of the StuG III Ausf G, mounted on the available chassis of the Panzer IV. The shorter casemate was lowered onto the longer hull. It did not fit. A raw, unprotected void remained at the front, between the fighting compartment and the transmission. So Krupp's engineers added a patch, a crude, box-shaped cabin for the driver. The large heads of the bolts were exposed, an ugly scar on the machine's skin, a clear sign it was an afterthought. This clumsy surgery had consequences. Shifting the casemate forward irrevocably broke the Panzer IV's balanced design. The weight imbalance was severe. Under battlefield stress, this caused catastrophic wear on the front road wheels, a structural flaw baked into its very core. On December 16 and 17, 1943, the finished prototype was presented to Hitler. He approved it for immediate production. But this approval was an act of desperation, an engineering compromise born from a catastrophe. To understand it, we must return to November 1943, when the Reich's primary assembly line was erased from the map. Why did the loss of a single Berlin workshop tear a hole in a defensive front stretching thousands of kilometers? The answer came from the sky. The night of November 26th to the 27th. Above the Berlin district of Spandau, the heavy drone of British bombers drowned out the sirens on the ground. Their target was surgically precise, the Alket factory on Holzhauser Strasse. The bombs found their mark. The administrative building's upper floors collapsed inward. Assembly halls burned out. The production lines froze solid. The industrial logic shattered. In October, Alket produced 255 assault guns. In December, it delivered just 24. This was not a decline. It was a systemic collapse. At that exact moment, Soviet armies were executing the massive Lower Dnieper offensive. Every self-propelled gun that never reached the front was paid for with the lives of German infantry. After the defeat at Kursk, the Wehrmacht had shifted to pure defense. Its entire strategy relied on these cheap assault guns to hold back the tide of Soviet armor. December 6, 1943. An emergency meeting. With the Alket factory in ashes, the Wehrmacht's defensive strategy was collapsing. The question was simple: who would build the replacements? The answer seemed obvious: move production to another factory. But German industry had a fatal flaw: a rigid logic. The Friedrich Krupp Grusenwerk plant in Magdeburg had the capacity, the workforce, the experience, but it was a fortress of specialization built exclusively around the Panzer IV chassis. The required assault gun used the Panzer III chassis, a smaller, lighter frame. The equipment in Magdeburg was calibrated for different dimensions, different components, stacks of precise engineering blueprints rendered into useless paper. Retooling the plant would take months the Reich no longer had. There was an alternative. The company FOMAG was developing the Jagdpanzer IV, a new tank destroyer, lower profile, better armor, a more powerful gun. But this plan also faced a critical bottleneck: a production crisis. The new weapon was designed for a gun that barely existed, a shortage of the 70 caliber cannon. With no time to retool, the Magdeburg factory made a radical choice: a 23-ton compromise. What technical specifications did this hastily assembled Frankenstein produce at the control weigh-in? The Krupp-Gruson plant assembled the first 30 units by the end of December. By January 1944, production of the Panzer IV ceased entirely. The line switched to the new vehicle. Combat weight, 23 tons, 900 kilograms lighter than its predecessor. This reduction offered a minor boost in power, but its true advantage was tactical. A height of just 2 meters and 20 centimeters, it made the assault gun a ghost in the folds of the terrain. The front was protected by 80 millimeters of armor. The gun was the proven 75 millimeter cannon, 48 calibers long. It received an official designation, SDKFZ 167. But this was no technological breakthrough. It was a forced hybrid, an answer to a logistical collapse. Hitler approved the design instantly. The Krupp-Gruson conveyor belt started moving. The production lines at Krupp-Gruson did not start for a technological leap. They started for a logistical necessity. Cabinet analysts obsessed over millimeters of ideal armor. But soldiers in the mud dreamed of a simple 2-ton crane. Why create a compromised assault gun over 2 meters 20 centimeters tall with no rotating turret? For one reason: the ability to produce it immediately on existing Panzer IV assembly lines. The chassis came from Krupp-Gruson, the superstructure from Alcat. This was not innovation, it was industrial survival. By June 1944, this brutal logic reached the front. Every new StuG IV came equipped with a folding 2-ton crane. The crew could now perform engine removal in the field. They unfolded the steel frame, attached the hooks, the metallic clang of chains under tension, then the slow, grinding lift of the heavy motor block from its housing. This unification with the Panzer IV chassis saved the Reich thousands of machine hours, the one resource Germany could not replace. For a retreating army with no repair bases, this was not a convenience, it was a lifeline. A knocked-out vehicle no longer meant a guaranteed trip back to the factory. The ultimate test for this unified design came on the Western Front. August 1944. The hybrids faced their first trial by fire, and the results were immediate. A commander in the 394th Assault Gun Brigade personally credited his vehicle with 6 Sherman tanks. His brigade destroyed 26 Allied tanks in a single day. This lethality became a system. The 17th SS Motorized Division received 42 StuG IVs instead of proper tanks. It was a clear signal, a forced change in strategy. Blitzkrieg was over. The new reality was static ambush defense in the Normandy bocage. The machines were thrown into the furnace of the front lines without regard for losses. This was not a measure of the vehicle's weakness. This was the mathematics of attrition. By early July, only 11 of the division's assault guns remained operational. While in Normandy, these machines burned out in weeks, geography on the Eastern Front gave them a new purpose. For 7 months, they became a fortress wall. The target is a T-34, 1,000 meters away. The StuG's 48 caliber gun fires. The shell covers the distance before the Soviet crew can react. It punches through the frontal armor. The enemy is eliminated before they even knew they were in a fight. How do you compensate for a 10-fold numerical disadvantage? You use a weapon that kills from a range where return fire is impossible. This was the tactic of the Courland bridgehead. October 1944. Army Group North is cut off. Over 200,000 German soldiers trapped on a peninsula by the Baltic Sea. General Ferdinand Schörner forbids calling it a cauldron. It is a bridgehead, a fortress. The terrain was his greatest asset. Marshes, forests, and narrow defiles between cold Latvian lakes. A landscape where tank columns had no room to maneuver, where a single well-placed gun could hold a road for hours. Here, the 184th, 226th, and 912th Assault Gun Brigades turned defense into a science of killing. The results were brutal. One battery from the 226th Brigade destroyed 35 Soviet tanks in just 2 days. The Red Army launched 6 major offensives to crush the pocket. All 6 were repulsed. The price was staggering. The 4th attempt alone cost 40,000 Soviet soldiers. and 541 tanks. That loss is comparable to the complete annihilation of 2 full Soviet tank armies. For 7 months, the pocket held. When the 6th major Soviet offensive began, the German guns methodically shattered the attack. The machines that held the line were themselves running on borrowed time. While the Krupp-Gruson plant hit its production peak, building over 1,000 assault guns, today only wreckage remains of that steel armada. In 2011, a piece of that armada surfaced. Location: a swamp in Latvia. The former Courland battlefield, where the 184th and 226th Brigades had once held their ground. Steel cables go taut, winches strain. A slab of rusted metal breaks the water's surface, dripping with the smell of swamp muck and old diesel. So where did over 1,000 of these steel machines vanish? The war ended. The cleanup began. The answer lies in the methodical efficiency of post-war Europe's scrapyards. By April 1945, over 1,100 StuG IVs had been built. Today, only 6 survive, a survival rate of less than 0.5%. Victors preserved heavy tanks as trophies for museums. But these workhorse assault guns were ruthlessly cut apart. Their steel was needed for post-war tractors. That rusted hull from the Latvian swamp? Gutted. No engine, no transmission. The asking price was €425,000. The rest are scattered. Static displays in varying states of decay. Only one still moves. The world's sole running StuG IV is at the Armored Vehicles Museum in Poznan. In Bovington, crowds still gather for the Tiger, a steel predator, a monument to fear. History also remembers the Ferdinand, a magnificent, glorious failure. The StuG IV earned no such legacy, not one documentary, no popular myth, only a footnote in the shadow of more famous machines. This historical vacuum was engineered into its design. The Tiger demanded unique parts, bespoke factory lines, a cult of industrial worship. The StuG IV was a pragmatic hybrid, built from the standard components of other tanks. It was a tool, utilitarian, devoid of drama. It was not a monster, it was not a disaster, it was simply effective. And that quality, its greatest strength on the battlefield, ensured its obscurity. Its utility became its own poison. This machine's utility was forged in steel, in a specific factory. A factory Allied intelligence had marked on a map. The Krupp-Gruson plant, in Magdeburg. 1944 was its peak. Over 1,000 vehicles rolled off the line. But it was also the limit. Allied strategy was simple. Identify key production hubs, then strike them faster than they can be rebuilt. Magdeburg was a key hub. How do you stop an assembly line working at its limit? You must destroy the city around it. The first warning came on February 22, 1944. American bombers struck the factory. Then came August 5th. The sky over the factory floor filled with a deafening roar. 179 B-17. Their bomb bay doors opened in unison. A cascade of dark metal. 432 tons of high explosives began their descent. This wasn't blind carpet bombing. It was mathematics. 432 tons from 179 aircraft meant a calculated strike, aimed at specific assembly lines. Nearly 700 of Magdeburg's residents were killed. The attacks continued. On January 16, 1945, the factory was on the target list again. This time, during the largest air raid the city would endure. It was just one raid, of 38. 38 massive air attacks on a single city, all to silence one production line. The story that began with a fire at the Alket factory in Spandau had come full circle. Now, Magdeburg was burning. In the first quarter of 1945, 102 new vehicles rolled out of the Magdeburg wreckage. They were not a triumph of production. They were a symptom of collapse. The industrial system, built by Speer's Ministry of Armaments, was breaking down. First the metal disappeared, then the fuel, then the transport itself. The war machine was starving. The dry clatter of steel tracks on a dirt road. Then silence. Another empty fuel tank. This logistical paralysis coincided with a strategic catastrophe. On the Eastern Front, the Vistula-Oder offensive advanced for 18 days, consuming German reserves faster than they could be deployed. The front line no longer existed, only isolated pockets of resistance. The 912th Assault Gun Brigade began April with 30 intact machines. They were not lost in heroic duels or tactical retreats. They were simply abandoned. The system was dead. By the end of the month, the brigade's official strength was 0. The collapse revealed a fundamental law, the brutal arithmetic of industrial war. The best weapons do not win. So what does? A weapon you can build on time, deliver where it is needed, and repair when it breaks. Germany poured its critical resources into engineering masterpieces, the Tiger, the Panther, each a fragile titan, a logistical dead end. But victory belonged to a different logic, a different machine. The StuG IV, not better designed, just simpler. Imagine a crew in the mud, wrenches in hand. The metallic clank of standard tools on universal bolts. They pull a working part from a burned-out donor vehicle. This is how the war was fought. And this is how the StuG IV kept fighting. The factory in Magdeburg built it from parts it already had. The proven modular chassis of the Panzer IV. It was a crisis solution, born from desperation. It lasted just a year and a half, but in that time, it filled the gaps where nothing else was left. It was not triumphant. It was not legendary. It was simply necessary. The Wehrmacht forgot this machine almost immediately. Its true history wasn't written in triumphant communiques. It was pieced together, decades later, by historians studying the real engine of the war.